Silence is a tool, a discipline, and a shield. It is not merely the absence of words, but the presence of wisdom. The older you get, the more you realize that speaking is often overrated, that words are thrown around carelessly, and that most people aren't really listening. They're just waiting for their turn to talk. You've spent a lifetime offering advice, explaining yourself, defending your actions, and trying to make people understand. But at some point, you must ask yourself, is it worth it? There is an incredible weight lifted when you recognize that you no longer need to justify yourself to anyone. The world is filled with noise, arguments, complaints, opinions shouted into the void, yet very little of it holds real substance. You've played your part in those conversations. You've tried to explain, to fix, to help. And what has that gotten you? More often than not, frustration. Because people don't change just because you tell them to. They change when they are ready, when they've suffered enough to listen. And that's something you can't force. As you age, you begin to see patterns in human behavior. You've seen people make the same mistakes over and over, ignoring the wisdom that could have saved them. And you've realized something critical. Silence is often more powerful than speaking. When you hold your tongue, you allow others to reveal themselves. When you stop explaining, you see who truly values your presence rather than what you provide. When you resist the urge to correct others, you free yourself from the burden of their ignorance. It's tempting to believe that if you just explain yourself better, if you just say the right words, people will finally understand. But most people don't want to understand. They want to be right. They want to stay in their illusions because illusions are comfortable. So why waste your breath? Why spend your energy trying to convince someone who has already made up their mind? There is an immense power in simply letting go. And this isn't about arrogance. It's not about thinking you're above others. It's about wisdom. You've been through enough to know that peace doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from detaching from them altogether. You don't have to respond to every slight, every provocation, every ignorant remark. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your choices, your boundaries, or your silence. In fact, silence is the greatest test of who truly respects you. Pay attention. When you stop initiating conversations, who reaches out? When you stop offering advice, who still values your presence? When you stop over-explaining, who truly seeks to understand? Silence reveals everything. It is an unforgiving mirror that exposes relationships for what they truly are. And sometimes the truth is painful. You realize that many people were only there because of what you could give them. Your time, your energy, your validation. And when you stop giving, they disappear. But that's a gift. Because what remains is real. In old age, your focus must shift inward. You've spent decades investing in others. Now it's time to invest in yourself. Learn to sit with your thoughts, to listen instead of speak, to observe instead of react. Watch how people behave when you stop trying to control the outcome. Watch how your own peace grows when you disengage from pointless debates. Watch how much clearer life becomes when you stop feeling the need to be understood by those who will never understand. People often mistake silence for weakness, but it is the opposite. Silence is restraint. It is self-discipline. It is knowing when to speak and when to hold back. It is the wisdom of choosing your battles carefully, knowing that some wars are simply not worth fighting. Not every insult needs a response. Not every disagreement needs a debate. Not every fool needs to be corrected. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. And when you do speak, let your words be intentional. Let them carry weight. A person who is always talking is rarely taken seriously, but the one who speaks sparingly when it truly matters is listened to with respect. That is the power of silence. When you learn to wield it, you command more influence than any loud, opinionated voice in the room. So, as you move forward in this stage of life, Embrace the quiet. Let go of the need to explain yourself. Choose silence over unnecessary battles. Protect your peace. And remember, those who truly value you will understand even when you say nothing at all. There's something deeply tragic about watching a person reach old age and crumble under the weight of neglect. Neglect not from the world, but from themselves. It's easy to blame circumstances, genetics, or time itself, but the truth is, much of how you experience old age is within your control. You can let your body wither, let your mind grow dull, let your spirit be consumed by regret, or you can take responsibility for what remains and strengthen it. And if you do, you'll find that life, even in its later years, still holds a fire worth tending. You see, people make the mistake of thinking aging is a passive process, as if it simply happens to you, but that's not entirely true. Aging isn't just the passage of time, it's the accumulation of your choices. Every day, you either contribute to your own decline or to your own resilience. And that's something worth taking seriously. The body, for instance, is remarkably adaptive. If you let it weaken, it will. If you neglect it, it will break down. But if you push it, even in small ways, it responds. You may not be able to turn back the clock, but you can make the time you have far more livable, far more dignified. It starts with movement. The worst thing a person can do in old age is become sedentary, waiting for the world to accommodate them instead of pushing themselves to remain capable. Strength isn't just for the young, it's for anyone who refuses to surrender to fragility. Walk every day, stretch, lift what you can, even if it's just your own body weight. The goal isn't to look like an athlete, it's to remain functional, independent, and in control of yourself. Because the moment you stop moving, the world begins to shrink. Suddenly, stairs become an obstacle. Simple tasks become burdens. And before you know it, you're at the mercy of others. That is not how you want to spend the years you have left. But it's not just the body, it's the mind as well. If you stop challenging yourself intellectually, your thoughts will stagnate. Your memory will fade. Your ability to think critically, to solve problems, to navigate life with clarity will erode. And people will notice. They'll start speaking to you as if you're fragile, as if you no longer have the capacity to contribute meaningfully. And the worst part, you might start believing them. That's why you must keep learning, read, write, engage with ideas that challenge you, have conversations that force you to think. Don't allow yourself to become a passive observer of life, watching the world from a distance as if you're no longer a part of it. You are still here. You still matter. But you have to act like it. And then there's the matter of emotional health, which too many people ignore until they're drowning in bitterness. You've seen it. People who have let resentment fester for years, who carry the weight of old grudges, who let regret and disappointment consume them. And what does it accomplish? Nothing. It only poisons them from the inside out. Let go of what burdens you. If you're holding on to anger, ask yourself, what is this anger doing for me? If you're clinging to regret, ask yourself, does dwelling on the past change it? No, it doesn't. It only robs you of the present, and as a cost you can't afford. The key is discipline. Discipline in how you care for your body and how you use your mind and how you guard your emotions. Because discipline is what gives you freedom. The freedom to walk without pain, to think with clarity, to live without resentment. It's not about striving for perfection. It's about making sure you don't decay before your time. People often say that old age is about slowing down, about stepping back, but that's the wrong mindset. Old age is about refinement. It's about stripping away what no longer serves you and strengthening what does. It's about treating yourself with the respect you've spent a lifetime earning, and that means taking care of yourself. Not as an afterthought, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Because here's the truth. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to do this for you. If you don't prioritize your health, your physical strength, your mental sharpness, your emotional well-being, then no one else will. And if you neglect it, you will pay the price. But if you take responsibility, if you make even small efforts every day, then the years ahead will not be years of decline, but years of resilience. And that choice, whether you make it or avoid it, will define the rest of your life. There comes a point in life when you realize that most of what you worried about, most of what kept you awake at night, most of what made you hesitate, second guess yourself, or hold back, was never really about you. It was about other people, their opinions, their expectations, their judgments. You spent years, maybe even decades, trying to be the person they wanted you to be. And for what? So they would approve, so they would applaud, so they would accept you as one of their own. And yet, no matter how much you gave, it was never enough. Seeking validation is a game with no finish line. The moment you think you've earned it, the rules change. The people you sought approval from either move on, raise the bar, or reveal that they never really cared in the first place. And so you end up exhausted, chasing something that was never meant to be caught. But here's the truth. If you live for the approval of others, you will die by their rejection. You will shape yourself into something you're not, and the worst part is that you'll still never be satisfied because their validation was never the problem. The problem was that you believed you needed it. Think about it. How many decisions in your life were made because you were afraid of what others would think? How many times did you silence yourself, shrink yourself, or go against your own instincts just to keep the peace? And how much did it cost you? That's the real question. Because every time you put someone else's approval above your own convictions, you gave away a piece of yourself. But you don't have to keep doing that. You don't have to explain yourself to people who were never going to understand in the first place. You don't have to prove your worth to those who will only see what they want to see. And you certainly don't have to waste the time you have left worrying about what people who don't walk in your shoes think of the path you've chosen. People will always have opinions. They'll criticize you when you fail, and they'll resent you when you succeed. They'll tell you how to live, but they won't live with the consequences of those choices. So why should their words hold more weight than your own? Why should their expectations define the limits of your life? The most liberating thing you can do in old age, or at any stage really, is to stop seeking permission to be who you are. To walk away from conversations that make you doubt yourself. To let people misunderstand you without feeling the need to correct them. To realize that the only person who truly needs to believe in you is you. And that's not an easy thing to accept, because for so long you were taught that belonging mattered, that fitting in was the goal, that being liked was the sign of a life well lived. But fitting in at the cost of your own authenticity is nothing short of self-betrayal. And being liked, that's just a temporary illusion, because people's opinions change like the wind. One day they love you, the next they don't. And if your sense of self is tied to their approval, you'll never have solid ground to stand on. There is a kind of peace that comes with letting go of all that. A peace that comes from knowing that you don't need to be understood, you don't need to be praised, and you don't need to be anything other than what you choose to be. And the moment you stop seeking validation, something incredible happens. You start living for yourself. You start making choices that align with who you truly are, not who you think people want you to be. You start speaking with conviction, walking with purpose, and acting with a kind of confidence that doesn't require an audience. Not everyone will like it. Some people will be uncomfortable. They were used to the version of you that was easily influenced, easily swayed, easily guilted into compliance. And when you stop playing that role, they won't know what to do with you. Let them be uncomfortable. That's not your burden to carry. Because in the end, the only approval that ever truly mattered was your own. And when you finally give it to yourself, you'll wonder why you ever needed it from anyone else. There is a dangerous trap people fall into as they grow older. It happens so gradually that they don't even realize it until one day they wake up and see that they are completely dependent on others. They don't have control over their own finances. They don't have control over their own emotions. They don't have control over their own lives. And that is a terrifying place to be. Because the moment you lose your independence, you become vulnerable. You become at the mercy of other people's decisions, their moods, their generosity, or worse, their lack of it. You cannot afford to let that happen. The world will not take care of you the way you think it will. People change, circumstances change, and if you are not prepared, if you do not have something of your own to fall back on, you will find yourself in a position where you have to beg for what should have been rightfully yours to begin with. That is not a situation anyone wants to be in, and yet so many people end up there because they didn't take the steps to secure their own future. Financial independence is not just about money. It's about freedom. It's about knowing that no matter what happens, you can stand on your own 2 feet. It's about never being in a position where someone else gets to dictate the quality of your life. And that requires discipline. It requires planning. It requires making decisions now that your future self will thank you for. And that means being smart with what you have. Too many people reach a certain age and think, I've worked hard, I deserve to enjoy myself now, and they spend without thinking. They give without boundaries. They assume that their children or family will take care of them when the time comes. But life doesn't work that way. People have their own struggles, their own priorities. And even the most well-intentioned promises can crumble under the weight of reality. You have to protect yourself. You have to ensure that your finances are in order, that your investments are secure, that your resources are managed wisely. Because when you have control over your financial situation, you have control over your choices. You don't have to tolerate mistreatment. You don't have to put up with people who drain you. You don't have to accept situations that compromise your dignity. But independence isn't just financial, it's emotional as well. And in many ways, that is even more important. Because the truth is, you can have all the money in the world, but if you are emotionally dependent on others for your sense of self-worth, for your happiness, for your stability, then you are just as vulnerable. People spend their entire lives attaching themselves to others, partners, children, friends, believing that their happiness is dependent on these relationships. And when those relationships shift, when people leave, when circumstances change, they are left completely unmoored, lost, because they never built a foundation within themselves. They never learned to be whole on their own. You have to be able to stand alone, not in bitterness, not in isolation, but in strength. You have to know that your happiness does not depend on whether or not someone calls, whether or not someone visits, whether or not people recognize your worth. Because if you tie your emotional state to others, you give them power over you. And that is a power they should never have. This is not about shutting people out. It is not about rejecting connection. It is about knowing that you are enough as you are without needing constant reassurance from others. It is about cultivating a life that is rich and fulfilling, regardless of who chooses to be a part of it. It is about understanding that your peace, your joy, your stability, those things come from within, not from external validation. And when you achieve that, when you are both financially and emotionally independent, something incredible happens. You become unshakable. You move through the world differently. You are no longer afraid of losing people because you are not reliant on them for your survival. financially or emotionally. You make decisions based on what is best for you, not on fear, not on obligation, not on guilt. That is true freedom. That is true power. And that is what you owe yourself. Because in the end, the only person who will always be with you from the beginning to the very last moment is you. And you had better make sure that person is strong enough to stand tall no matter what comes. As you move through life, you start to realize that not all relationships are worth keeping. Not all connections are beneficial. And not everyone who walks with you for a time is meant to stay. But too many people hold on out of habit, out of guilt, out of fear of being alone. They tolerate relationships that drain them, that diminish them, that burden them with expectations they can never meet. And they do it because they've been conditioned to believe that more relationships mean a richer life. But that isn't true. A full life is not measured by the number of people around you. It's measured by the quality of those people. There comes a point when you must be selective, when you must look at the people in your life and ask, are they lifting me up or pulling me down? Do they bring peace or do they bring chaos? Because every relationship you maintain requires energy. It requires time. It occupies space in your mind and heart. And if you are not careful, you will spend your later years exhausted, tangled in relationships that offer nothing but obligation, resentment, or that is not how you want to live. You don't owe your presence to people who only take from you. You don't have to keep connections alive out of a sense of duty when those connections bring you nothing but stress. The idea that you must always be available, always be accommodating, always be the one to reach out, that is a dangerous and misguided belief. It turns relationships into burdens rather than blessings. And so you must choose carefully. Keep the people who respect you, who challenge you to be better, who bring warmth and kindness into your life. But for those who manipulate, who criticize, who undermine your peace, let them go. Not in anger, not in spite, but with the understanding that your time is too precious to be wasted on those who do not value you. This is not selfishness, this is self-respect. You are not shutting yourself off from the world. You are simply ensuring that the world you surround yourself with is one that nurtures you rather than drains you. And when you do that, something remarkable happens. You find that your days become lighter, that conversations become more meaningful, that the energy you once spent on maintaining empty, exhausting relationships can now be used for things that truly matter. Because in the end, the people you allow into your life shape your reality. They influence your thoughts, your emotions, your sense of self, and if you are not careful, they can diminish you piece by piece until you no longer recognize yourself. That is why you must be ruthless in protecting your space. Because the relationships you keep will either be the weight that drags you down or the force that lifts you higher, and you, at this stage in your life, have no time to carry unnecessary weight. There's a heaviness that settles on people when they reach a certain age, a quiet grief for the things they didn't do, the words they didn't say, the chances they let slip away. Regret is a cruel thing. It lingers in the mind, whispering all the ways life could have been if only different choices had been made. And the worst part? There's no way to go back, no way to undo the past, no way to rewrite the story. But dwelling on it, letting it consume you, that's the surest way to waste the time you still have. You can spend your days looking in the rearview mirror, or you can face forward and decide that whatever time remains will mean something. Because the past may be set in stone, but the present is still yours to shape. And no matter your age, no matter your past mistakes, there is purpose still left in you. People think purpose is something grand, something out of reach, reserved for the young and ambitious. But purpose is not about chasing some monumental achievement. It's not about fixing everything you think went wrong. It's about choosing to live with intention, to wake up each day and say, I will not waste this. It's about making the most of what's in front of you, about finding meaning in the small things, about refusing to let your remaining years slip through your fingers unnoticed. Because what's the alternative? Drifting through life, waiting for the end? Sitting in regret, replaying old mistakes? That is no way to live. There is still work to do. Maybe it's in the wisdom you can pass on. Maybe it's in the kindness you can show. Maybe it's in taking care of yourself, in walking outside, in breathing deeply and appreciating that you are still here. And if regret still haunts you, if the past still holds its grip, then ask yourself, what can I do right now to make peace with it? If you need to seek forgiveness, do it. If you need to let go of anger, release it. If there's something left unsaid, say it. But don't sit in it. Don't let yesterday steal today from you. You cannot change the past, but you can honor it by living differently now, by refusing to make the same mistakes, by choosing to be present, to be grateful, to make use of what remains. Because in the end, the measure of your life will not be in what you lost or what you failed to do. It will be in how you chose to live, right up until the very last moment. At some point, you come to understand that life is not about pleasing everyone, nor is it about carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. It is about standing firm in who you are, protecting your peace, and making the most of the time you have left. There is no sense in chasing validation from those who will never see your worth. There is no wisdom in clinging to relationships that drain you. And there is no dignity in living a life shaped by fear, regret, or obligation. You must focus on yourself, not selfishly, but with the understanding that your well-being, your peace, and your purpose matter. Build a life that is financially secure and emotionally independent so that no one has the power to dictate your happiness. Choose the people around you carefully because they will either uplift you or drag you down. And most importantly, live with purpose, not regret. The past is gone, but today is still yours. There is strength in silence. There is wisdom in stillness. And there is freedom in letting go of everything that no longer serves you. You have carried enough weight. Now is the time to walk forward, light, clear, and unshaken.